What if the key to raising curious, creative, confident children is not finding the perfect curriculum, but learning from the families who helped shape some of history's most influential thinkers, artists, writers, and leaders? In today's episode, we are looking beyond formulas and fear to explore what an inspired education can actually look like. My guest, Jennifer Pepito, studied the childhoods of 10 remarkable figures, including C.S. Lewis, Laura Ingalls, Leonardo da Vinci, Booker T. Washington, and more. The stories reveal that there is no single perfect way to homeschool, but there are powerful threads that appear again and again. Supportive adults, meaningful ideas, time to explore, strong habits, and parents who recognize and nurture their unique gifts within their children. Jennifer and I talk about why gentle education does not mean easy or undisciplined, how parents can stop recreating school at home, and why our own curiosity, faith, habits, and love of learning may influence our children more than any lesson plan ever could. We also have an honest conversation about parenting older children, releasing our expectations, and remaining faithful even when the outcome looks different than the story we imagined. Jennifer is the host of the Restoration Home podcast, the best-selling author of Habits for a Sacred Home, and the founder of Peaceful Press. Her newest book, The Inspired Homeschool, How History's Heroes Light a Path Toward Joyful, Confident Learning, combines history, biblical wisdom, practical guidance, and Jennifer's decades of experience to help families create homes filled with curiosity, creativity, virtue, and purpose. Jennifer is also a dear friend and a returning guest to the podcast. And every time we talk, I leave more encouraged, challenged, and reminded of the beauty of this work that we have been called to. So go grab your favorite beverage and join me for this inspiring conversation with Jennifer Pepito. Hey everyone, welcome to the Homeschool Feast, and I'm here chatting with my amazing friend Jennifer Pepito. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello, Julie. Such a joy to get to chat with you. Such a wonderful
Always. We
person.
were just chatting and we're like, I should probably hit record and we should actually start because we could talk all day long because we have so much in common and have so much love for the same things. And so I always just enjoy having you on. I think this is your third time on my podcast.
I think so. Thank you, Julie. So
I think you
generous.
are holding the record here. But today we're talking about your new book, and I just love it because I am such a history nerd. And so can you explain the concept? I really love it because it's so different than any other homeschool book out there.
Yay. That's always my hope. We don't need more
Yeah,
information. I feel like we see
right.
Jesus teaching through stories, and I think we just need more good stories. So I hope more people will write also homeschool fiction, like Awakening
Mhm.
of Miss Prim. That book was like a homeschool mother culture book. Anyhow, back to my book. It's about homeschoolers in history. So it's about 10 different people who are homeschooled for at least part of their education and the diverse ways they were educated is so encouraging because I think we can get so nervous and wrapped up in, oh, I have to do classical perfect or I have to do Charlotte Mason perfectly. And when you see these great minds, you can find threads of what was consistent, like supportive adults in their lives or great mentors or some time to learn their own things, but it's all different. And so it's so encouraging for you as a homeschooler to see, look at how Leonardo used the power of observation and we can apply that with our homeschool notebooks, or look at how C.S. Lewis read and talked about books with a tutor and we can apply that with our students in our narration practices. So there's just so many practical takeaways, but it's just these encouraging stories of people in history who were homeschooled.
Yeah, and so like how did you narrow this list down?
That was hard.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
sure.
yes,
If you
because
only have what, 10?
yes, only 10. And
Yeah.
one of the hardest ones was picking an artist because for the most part I tried to pick people of faith. I am
Yeah.
like my faith is so important to me, my relationship with the Lord, and so I wanted to pick people of faith. And they're like I had found this beautiful poem by Michelangelo. I know that at some point in his life he had faith in God. I know there are many Christian artists, but I ultimately chose Berta Morisot
I love
because
that so
she
much.
was one of the only female impressionists. And so that was like so radical in itself in the 1800s. And then she had this reverence for motherhood. You can see that in her painting The Cradle, where the mom is staring at the baby. That's a painting of her sister and her niece. And then she also had this really sweet community. It was really interesting reading about like how her daughter met her husband through maybe Cezanne or something. And I can't remember. It's the painter who does all the ballerinas. And I don't know why I can't
Oh,
connect that.
Degas.
Thank you. So just these beautiful stories of her family life, the way her parents really nurtured her love for art in a time when you weren't really allowed to go to art school as a woman, and in a time where there was no precedent in a way. Her parents just loved their kids enough to care about what they were interested in. And so that was really one of the ones that was the hardest to narrow down, because there just are so many artists in history who were homeschooled, which I think is particularly
Telling, yes.
significant. You know what I mean? That creative people often have a
Hmm.
little bit more freedom to learn.
Absolutely. There's that TED Talk by Sir Kenneth Robinson, like the school creativity, and the answer is yes. Just
Yes.
save you the 29 minutes.
Yes.
So it does make sense that there's a lot of artists. I never made that actual connection, which is really fascinating. Okay, so you have Jesus, Laura Ingalls Wilder, Benjamin Franklin, Elizabeth Gouge, who's an author. I love her work. C.S. Lewis, Da Vinci, Charles Dickens, Pascal, Meursault, Booker T. Washington, and Joan of Arc. That was an interesting choice as well. So out of these ones, is there one that like particularly surprised you?
Elizabeth Gouge was so interesting. I don't ever know if it's Gouge or Gouge.
Yes,
I'm gonna
and
trust you
tomato
on this.
one.
I That was so interesting to me because I love her books and she's so deep. Her every single book that she writes is such a philosophy commentary on life and faith, and I she has daily devotions that are beautiful. She has a lot of amazing work, and she in some ways she didn't have this amazing life. Her mother was an invalid. Her dad was an Oxford theologian, and so she was really immersed in probably great language and deep learning and great discussions. A lot was happening around her, but because her mother was an invalid, her life in some ways was limited, and she never married. She never had her own family. And I don't know, for me, in some ways, because her books always talk about family life. There's always
Mhm.
these beautiful stories of families and learning to work things out in your marriage, or they're beautiful stories. And yet she never had that joy of family life. And so it is interesting, even just that encouragement that sometimes our gifts are developed in our hardships. For those
Absolutely, yes.
homeschool moms listening who are going through a hard season, whether it's a child with special needs or a difficult marriage or whatever it might be, sometimes the gifts and the things that are going to come out of you later to help people might be being developed in these hard seasons. And I really was surprised about that with Elizabeth Gouge, how she wrote so with so much depth and beauty and inspiration, despite not having the experience of her own family.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good too because I know a lot of homeschool moms who do have chronic health issues and they think I'm doing my kids a disservice. I can't be a great homeschool mom. And I'm like, that's such a great story that you have to show them. Like, yes, you can. Now, did most of these people have tutors and they were being homeschooled that way, like governesses, tutors, those kind of things, or was it the parents actually doing?
Yeah, it was a mix with Charles Dickens. He really had almost no education. Same with Benjamin Franklin. Charles Dickens ended up in a in a child labor situation as a child. Elizabeth Gouge was, from what I understood, almost the whole way through taught by her mother, but she also had the governess that she felt like she was just such a failure with, couldn't figure out the
Mhm.
facts of grammar or something. So there was a mix of tutors, parents. For C.S. Lewis in his early years, it was his mother, and then later on he was in boarding school, and then as a high school student he was living with a family and being tutored one-on-one by someone. Leonardo da Vinci, there's not as much of details about his early childhood
Yeah.
education, just that he was illegitimate so he couldn't go to school. Then Jesus
Yeah.
was, he was the son of a laborer, and he was the oldest son in a high tax time. So presumably there was not a lot of intentional education happening at all, and yet he knew the scriptures. And I think that because he was in a Jewish family, there would have been an emphasis on teaching, as you rise up, as you lie down, teaching the word of God to their children. But there's no indication that he had any formal schooling.
Yeah, yeah, that's good because I think it's good that to highlight the differences because, like you said, like it's not all or nothing. You can have this combination and you can try different things and it can change. And it's not like I have the perfect system and we're doing the same thing from grades 1 through 12. And no, it can be changing and evolving with depending on your family
Yeah.
and your
Yeah, I
circumstances.
think I think Leonardo da Vinci in his early years had a lot of free time, but then for most of them, one of the things I think is significant, for most of them, by the time they were in the high school years, their parents noticed their gifts and they made sure they had tutors who would really develop those gifts. And I think that is so important, that as your children go into the older years, that you're not trying to do, I don't really believe in the credit system necessarily, because if your children, we do it the way we can do it. But if your children are going to go to college, they're going to review all that general ed anyhow. And if high school is this amazing time where if your child has a gift or talent that you're starting to see develop, then center as much as you can around that. You know, if they have a gift or talent in science, then try to incorporate the history of science in your history teaching, and make sure the math classes are going to accentuate their science experiments and their science explorations. I think that as much as possible, we should be tailoring their education in high school. And that's what in the life of Blaise Pascal, the life of Leonardo da Vinci, the life of Bertha Morisot, is that their parents really facilitated them going beyond what their abilities were in high school.
Yeah, and that it doesn't have to be all on the parent to know everything either.
Yes, absolutely. It was,
Sorry.
yeah, that was incredibly inspiring that, and that's how we did do high school that way. We'd apprentice our kids with someone, or we'd have college classes in high school, because it's a time where they have a capacity to learn that's really magnificent. And to think that because you're a homeschooler, you have to do it all yourself, I think is probably could be a little bit. And I'm not for putting kids necessarily in public school where they get all the garbage and they don't really get their gifts facilitated either. It's just more finding those tutors in those situations that are going to develop the gifts that are in them.
Yeah. And so the book's called The Inspired Homeschool. And in the introduction, you do talk about a little bit of this: do schools kill creativity? And are schools actually preparing them for who even knows what these days, right? With everything that's going on. And so how would you define an inspired homeschool versus an uninspired homeschool? Because I feel like you can still homeschool and not be providing these kind of opportunities in the style of learning that you're talking about.
Yeah, partly I think that we as parents have to get a little bit inspired. And that might mean deschooling yourself. I think there's so much fear around homeschooling. And this is what I especially hope to overcome in the book is look at all these people were homeschooled. Some of them were more unschooled. Some of them had private tutors. There's a wide variety of ways that they were, but none of them were in K through 12 public education for 6 hours a day with homework on top of that. And yet their gifts were developed. And so I think looking at that and saying, okay, I'm going to stop trying to copy the public schools in my home. And I really highlight the Charlotte Mason principles because I think it's the best way to nurture this creativity and nurture our children's gifts. Because in the early years, you focus on giving your children a feast of living ideas. You work on developing the atmosphere of your home. You work on the discipline of habits. And so you get this great foundation for your children. Then you fill their mind with this feast of beautiful ideas, not little bits of textbooks, not little boring workbook assignments, but the best living books. You fill them with that. And then as they grow, you can find tutors that'll help develop those, or a computer program if that's what you need towards the high school years, but that you don't waste their early years with a bunch of little grammar workbooks that they're not even ready for, or a bunch of like language arts that's not necessary yet. We in the Peaceful Press, I know Charlotte Mason, I know Gentle Feast, we would more recommend teaching grammar a little bit later. And so in the early years, just focus on phonics and spelling and some copywork and dictation in those first 3 years of school, and read aloud every day to them. But people are flipping it. They're trying to get through the academics. They're doing something like The Good and the Beautiful, which is so tedious and so overkill in those early years. And then there's no time left to read out loud to your children.
Yeah, and those are the beautiful things that have ideas. Those are the things that are inspiring, right? But I agree with you that the mother has to be inspired first. And so as you looked at these people throughout history, was there a thread of what the parent was doing for their own inspiration?
Such a good question. In thinking about it, like the parents in many of these cases was interested in learning themselves. Elizabeth Good's mother and father, they were definitely students, very curious about life. Yeah. Leonardo da Vinci's dad was a notary. He was very active in his community. Blaise Pascal's dad was, I think, maybe an accountant and also very active in his life, in his community. So I think they were in some ways people who were inspired. But Booker T. Washington's mom was a slave. And so, but she still, even though she didn't know how to read herself, she still was interested in Booker's curiosity and tried to facilitate learning for him, which I think that's so remarkable because it's easy sometimes to think, I don't have a good education, or we don't have good finances, or we have all these limitations. And yet that mom, if anyone had limitations, is Booker T. Washington's mom. And yet she still did what she could to facilitate his learning. And so I think just having
Mm,
that attitude that, hey, you can do anything. We can learn this. We might not have the skills, we might not have what we need now, but we can figure it out. And just the idea that God has created us for a purpose. In the first chapter, when I'm talking about Jesus, I talk about having a vision, because I think
yep.
that's where inspiration comes from, is that we as a parent, a think that we are the beloved child of God, adopted into his family, and because of that we are worthy of love, and we're worthy of having a dream and having a vision, and we recognize that God has made us a steward. Like you look at the parable of the servants, and how the servant who used the talents they were given was the one who glorified God. And so if we are feeling depressed about life, or feeling like there's nothing good that we have to offer, just lacking in a lot of confidence ourselves, I think that's something to work on, because that's not what scripture says. It's like, you've been made for life and godliness. You have everything you need for life and godliness. And so I think that feeling as a mom, if feelings of unworthiness are making it hard for you to get excited about learning with your children, I would recommend figuring out how to work on that, and how to overcome some of those
Mhm.
toxic thoughts, so you can start to get excited and curious with your kids, because your kids will model you. There's a book
Yep.
called Selfish Reasons to Have More Kids, and it's by an economist. And
Okay.
he had done all this research. So the book is about, you should have more kids because basically your kids are going to turn out like you. And I think
Mm,
that is probably one of the most significant things to think about as a parent, is like, it's not so much what you teach your children, but how you
yep.
live. Are you living as someone who is excited to learn new things, who is
Yep.
interested in art and history and science? Or are you just going through the motions and then numbing out at night? Figure out how to get excited and curious yourself, so you can model that for your children.
Yeah. Okay. I love everything you just said. It reminds me of the phrase, what's caught, not taught, and that we have to have be inspired, and then that's what's caught. And it's not so much what we're teaching, what the curriculum is. Half of that, I feel like maybe 80% is our inspiration, our enthusiasm, our love for life, and what is going on inside of us. And that inspires our kids. Not that I don't necessarily want all my kids to turn out like me. And there's certain things that, and you have multiple children too, that one kid picked up on my love of theater and one kid picked up on my love of history. It's different things, but I think that is so key, because we can focus so much on all the little nitty gritty details and what my homeschool room is going to look like and what am I going to use for math. But we miss this big picture of what am I, or how am I inspiring them? What kind of life am I living? What am I interested in? It reminds me of, have you ever read Gifted Hands by Ben Carson?
No.
Oh, so good. So his
Mm.
mom was a single mom. They're living in Detroit in poverty. She's working three different jobs. He's failing school, about to get kicked out in the fifth grade, can barely read. And his mom was like you were talking about with Booker T. Washington, she didn't necessarily have the skills herself. She's like, we're going to go to the library and you're going to read this many books a week and you're going to give me a book report. And he didn't find out until he was in high school, and he ended up graduating valedictorian and going on to be a brain surgeon, all this stuff. But like, his mom didn't know how to read. So she never actually could read the book reports that he gave her every week, but it was her, not just enthusiasm, like you're saying, because it might not be that you have the time or the interest for these things, but the fact that you are so dedicated to believing that books and learning actually can change a person, that just that one belief and that dedication, right? It wasn't a bunch of other things. It was literally just books.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing
Yeah.
to think about just how much power just our interest has. And there was a study Raymond Moore quoted a lot by the Smithsonian about genius. And one of the components was a supportive adult in their life. And one of
Mm.
the components was some time to themselves. And so there
Oh,
was only there, I don't remember what the third one was. There was like three components. And so those two things, your child has gifts inside of them. And
mm,
two of the things that you can do, these free easy things you can do, is just give them some time to explore their interests and be interested in what they're interested in.
yeah. It's so good. And then when I think of another homeschool person that has really inspired me, it's Louisa May Alcott. And I actually didn't know much about her schooling or anything until we went up to Concord to her house and we were touring it. And I was like, her dad actually started a school in Boston for freed enslaved people. And that caused a bunch of controversy in the early 1800s, blah, blah, blah. But her dad had some very unique views of education. So that's why if you see in Little Women, that was actually their childhood. They wrote plays and they played in the woods and did art and did all these things that weren't respectable for girls and all that. But he wanted them to have that freedom. He believed in that educational kind of philosophy. And then to see her and her sisters, what came out of that was like amazing. But so I was talking to my kids afterwards. I was like, when I first started homeschooling, I wanted to be like Marmee and Little Women. And but then real life happened. I realized we don't actually live back then, and that's not. But then my kids were like, "But that is the education you gave us. We did actually dress up and put on shows on a regular basis, and we did play in the woods all day long." And I was like, "Oh wait, you're right." And so that's why I love in here. I really feel like it can inspire parents to have a model and an idea of what they are actually moving towards, like you're saying, like a vision and your why. Really, how foundational that is as well. Is there a particular homeschooled person or parent you mentioned the awakening of Miss Prim or the story that really inspired you when you were homeschooling?
I think, you know what really gave me a vision, for one thing, the Charlotte Mason Companion by Karen Andriola. It was just so easy to read. It wasn't, I love In Vital Harmony by Karen Glass. That's one of my favorite Charlotte Mason books because it just lays out the principles so clearly and makes it really easy to adopt in your home. And the Charlotte Mason Companion does not as comprehensively lay out the
Right.
principles, but it was just such a beautiful vision in a way of
Mhm.
what homeschooling could be like. And that was one of my first homeschool like how-to books that I read.
Yeah, it's one of the first ones for Charlotte Mason available on a big
Yeah.
scale. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I love that book. But also there was a Raymond Moore, it was like a book that was a compilation of different homeschoolers' stories or a sort of a day in the life of different homeschoolers. And this one in there, I just remember so clearly. She talks about how and I don't even remember which book it was, but it was like, she talked about how in the mornings they would light a candle and they would eat peanut butter toast and they would take a walk down their lane and they would talk about their day and then they would have their story time. And it just was like this really peaceful, holistic vision of what home life could be, where it was this comfortable flow of learning and life that really set me up to think of my home as a teacher. And so in my home, there's a lot of art and poetry and a wonderful library and plants growing. And I'm always trying something new, whether I'm trying to figure out how to paint or make sauerkraut or sourdough. My home is one of the teachers. My home is a school for the service of the Lord, as I talk about in Habits for a Sacred Home. And so I think that gave me a vision early on that has sustained me. And that's what I hope too with the Inspired Homeschool, is that moms will start to get, because there's so many people homeschooling. Here's the thing. There are so many people homeschooling, and I'm so happy about that. But
Oh
I think
yeah.
a lot of them don't really have a vision. They're just like, yeah, public school is ruining my
Yep.
child. But then they come home and they just kind of copy that. They put their
Yep.
kids on a
Mhm.
computer all day, or they put them in textbooks all day, and then the kids are crying and it's miserable and it's overkill. And I feel sad about that because
Mhm.
they're not having any fun. Mom is not having any fun with her kids if that's what she's trying to do. And the kids aren't having any fun. And then it makes it a wash. Do you know what I mean? If you could be in
Mhm.
public school and you're kind of getting bullied, or you're in homeschool and you're just on a computer all day, a little bit of a wash. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Right.
so I feel like you have this short time. If you do a good
Mhm.
job, your kids are going to be pretty independent of you, even in middle school, high school. It's not going to be all hands on anymore. I always could get through my homeschool day in 3 hours a day. And by high school, most of my kids were completely independent. And we just did our morning time. We'd read the Bible together still. We'd read aloud together, but that was more for connection than
Mhm.
necessity. And so it's a short season, and especially if you don't have that many kids. I have 7 kids. I've been doing it for almost 30 years, and it still feels like it went by in a flash. And I wish I could have more time because we had
Yep.
fun. I
Yep.
had a lot of fun. And so if there's any, and I still, a lot of these moms, I know they have to work, but I got up in the morning and I wrote for a little while, and then I did school for a little while, and then worked on my business in the afternoon. You could still work and homeschool a better way. You could still do other things, but just, I feel so sad for these moms who they just want, because the early years resources for us, it's a lot of play-based activities. It doesn't take
Mhm.
that long though. Like, can
No.
you not just play with your child for an hour a day? Could you not just even listen to an audiobook while you guys fold clothes together? If you don't want to read out loud, if you feel like you have no capacity, at least just listen to an audiobook for a little while. Your kids could draw a picture while they're listening. You could fold the laundry or have your work on your computer if you feel like you have to, and then talk about it a little bit. Have them write something, do a math page, And there you go. That's a good school day. But people are doing these boring textbooks, and it's all, there's propaganda in anything you're getting from a public school or a secular
Yep.
company is
Yep.
fully propagandized with like a
Yep.
victim narrative, a nihilistic worldview, and straight out Marxism. And so not only are you ruining your children's soul by not reading these living books and these reading the scriptures, singing, looking at art together, but you're also probably propagandizing them against your values.
That's a really good point. Yeah. I definitely noticed that when I was a public school teacher for sure. It was really challenging. In your book, you talk about in the chapter about Laura Ingalls, you brought up something that has become quite the topic here. So we're just gonna chat about it, okay? Because I know you posted about it on Instagram and I have too. You're talking about Laura Ingalls and childhood and setting up your home atmosphere when the kids were younger. And you said, and gentle is a beautiful way to describe those early homeschool days. We had a clear vision for slow days, enjoying time in nature and savoring lovely stories. Our school days were centered on this togetherness. Okay, girl, let's talk about the word gentle. Because I know that you are also seeing this, and I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah, it's really sad because it is not rigorous to read the Chronicles of Narnia to your children. It is not rigorous to read the King James Bible out loud to your children. Do you know what I mean? That is not rigorous.
Yeah.
It's just we're not making a 7-year-old sit there writing an essay when developmentally they're not ready for it. So it's not rigorous. It's just we're being developmentally appropriate. And there are other ways to teach the things. I love John Taylor Gatto's quote about all you need for success in high school can be learned in 2 or 3 years of formal skill study. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to be doing rigorous grammar with a second grader to be a good homeschooler.
Yeah, and I laugh because I'm like, have you seen the books that they read in a Charlotte Mason homeschool? These are way more challenging, especially in high school, than I had in college at a very reputable university. I don't know. What about this is equating gentle with easy? And I think, I don't know if it's in response to gentle parenting. So they also think gentle homeschool means hands off or not laying out the feast for your kids and just willy-nilling it or let them guide the education. I'm like, did I miss something? Was there
And
something that came out? And
right. And you know what? There might be some of that happening because I think that is one of the dangers of the gentle parenting movement is moms have failed to be leaders for their children.
right,
I love Simplicity Parenting by Kim John Payne because it's like it's all this gentle, developmentally appropriate parenting advice, and yet he still says you have to be the leader. Your children are going to feel safer when you
yeah,
lead the values in your home and when you set the boundaries. And so I
yeah,
think that is what's happening probably is that these moms have been doing gentle parenting where there's no direction, no boundaries, no accountability. And I know that's not saying gentle parenting is
yes,
in some ways a generalization because there's a lot
yeah,
of gentle parents who are just more developmentally appropriate or just
yes,
more
right,
aware. Charlotte Mason said children are born persons. So we should be treating them like persons who are
agree.
worthy of respect and honor and not being disrespectful to them, not being cruel, not expecting things that are not appropriate for them. And so I believe in gentleness. Bring your children up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Nurture is important, but I think that those moms who have, it may be out of guilt even because they were at one point too strict or their parents were too strict, are not providing any boundaries for their kids. And I know this because I did this for a little while. And then they can't homeschool any other way besides gentle homeschooling because their children won't listen to them. And so it is a free for all. Their kids won't sit still for morning time. They won't sit still to any homeschool. There are zero boundaries. And I feel bad for those moms and kids because those kids probably are going to end up in public school and maybe even on medication because if your kids won't listen to you, they're not either going to listen to a teacher necessarily.
Yeah, like what Charlotte Mason talks about with the habits of obedience and authority and her concept of masterly inactivity, that we're still leading, we're still in charge. And like you're saying, the kids need that safety, they need that structure, they want to know where the fence is. We have to hold that line and at the same time respecting them and giving them freedom that is developmentally appropriate. And I love that you use
Exactly.
that word because I feel like that is really the difference. It's not trying to make children learn something that they're not ready or capable for because somehow, somewhere in some system, we just kept pushing things down younger and younger. It's, oh, our high school kids can't write essays. So now we're going to have kindergartners start writing paragraphs. That makes no sense. I'm not going to give a 5-year-old keys and be like, when you're 16, you need to know how to drive. Let's start today. That's not developmentally appropriate. And yes, you might. I used to teach kindergarten. You can get a paragraph if you basically write it for them and have them copy it. And it takes weeks and lots of tears. And yes, you can make that happen, but that's not actually the goal, right? And so I think we have focused so much on the product over the person that we want the result. We want it to look all shiny. And yes, I have homeschooled and they've learned these things, and here's the list, and here's the test, and here's the 9 out of 10 right on this worksheet, rather than focusing on the person. So as you looked at these people throughout history, where was the thread of their personhood in all of this?
Yeah. And that was one thing. Part of the objective in some ways with the Inspired Homeschool is that these moms would develop more of their own personhood in a way. Because I think when you are so misattuned to yourself and to God, then it is easy to be under pressure and shaken with every wind of change. Like,
Yes.
oh, it's this thing that's popular, and so we're gonna do this. And these people are doing this, and so we're gonna do this. And these people are saying I need to do more of this, and I'm gonna do this. And it's like there's no steadiness, there's no, and I think that's what makes homeschooling hard then, is you don't feel confident in what God's telling you to do, in yourself as a mom. And I totally get it. I was such an insecure young mom and was so much about proving myself and trying to make sure that I measured up and trying to make sure my kids conformed so that I looked good. So I do understand it's a process. Becoming a confident woman is a process. But I think the more we, and this is where I think sometimes stories can be so encouraging because we see other people developing that. Laura Ingalls Wilder growing up and her mom's going through all these hardships and she's observing all this, but she sees how her mom creates this beautiful home atmosphere in the midst of real struggles. And then when she's in a situation as a young teacher where she's living with a family who are very dysfunctional and the mother's probably deep in depression, she's, oh, whoa, this is not how I want to live. This is not the home that I was raised in. And so I think it's just so encouraging to see how Ma continues cultivating faith and hope in the middle of hardship. And that helps Laura see like how to live. There's so much that we are just, again, conveying to our children by the way we live, even more than by what we teach, which is brings us back to education as an atmosphere. And we are the atmosphere.
Yes, yes, 100%. And I had you on my podcast before and we talked about habits in your book on habits, and we brought it up again. We were talking about how important those habits are, and it's not something you can skip because you do have to have your kids be able to listen to you in order to homeschool them, or you can just start to allow things that aren't helpful. So you had a chapter on Benjamin Franklin and you talked about him and his habits. So tell us about him and his habits, and then what habits do you feel like helped you the most as a homeschool parent?
Yeah. So Benjamin Franklin was obsessed with habits, like
Yeah,
his,
a little OCD, a little bit.
his probably, yeah. And he says, who is strong? He who that can conquer his bad habits. But I think that because he had such a discipline about his days, that's what allowed him to invent. And I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a book about artists. I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but it's like all these little excerpts from different artists' lives. And some of them were
Yes,
very
I know what you're talking
deviant
about.
or reprobate. They
Yeah.
weren't godly people necessarily. But these artists all had very regimented time for work. And I
Yep.
think that is the beauty of habits. Like habits, sometimes I think people take it as being, oh, I'm not gonna be very creative if I have habits, or we're not gonna be a very like interesting family if we have habits. We'll just be like so regimented. But the beauty of habits is that it helps us accomplish things. Like it gives us space for creativity. The way that Benjamin Franklin was able to invent so many things is that he had like a discipline of work, and so then there was time for that. And I think for us there are so many different categories of habits, like our spiritual habits, our health habits, our home habits, our school habits. And even like with Benjamin Franklin, he had, a habit of resolution, resolve to perform what you ought and perform without fail what you resolve. A habit of frugality, make no expense, but to do good to others or yourself and waste nothing. A habit of order, let all your things have their places. Let each part of your business have its time. And I think sometimes we don't even know where to start. Do you know what I mean? We're like,
Right. Yeah.
what habit should I work on? That's why in the Restoration Home community, we have 3 habits a month, and some of them are pretty basic. This month, like in July, One of our habits is greeting dad when he comes home from work and teaching how to clean the bathroom and reading the Bible. Those are basic habits.
They're
Most of
very
you
important,
might,
though. Let me tell you, cleaning the bathroom, very important.
yes.
Especially if you have boys, very important.
Yes, I know. It's like your life will be so much better if your boys know what happens when they pee all over the place and clean up after themselves. So it's like sometimes we're so overwhelmed with our lives. Our lives are so full. We're homeschooling, we're parenting. We have to clip 1,000 toenails and fingernails a month. You know what I mean? Because all these things that we're responsible for. And so having some habits that are spelled out for us, whether you have a little habit tracker you fill in, whether you join a community that works on habits, I think, and that's what that whole chapter, The Discipline of Habits, is about, is just here's some habits we could work on, but start small. Start with 1% improvement. You're not going to be able to, Rome wasn't built in a day. You have to start small.
Yeah. One of the things I thought was really interesting, I looked at like how Ben Franklin scheduled his days, and it's actually very similar to how Charlotte Mason scheduled her days, which totally relates to your point of they both use the concept of time blocking. This is my hour. This is the hour I do this. And Charlotte Mason was very regimented in her daily schedule. She would have 2 to 3 hours every afternoon where, because of her health, they would drive her in the carriage, but she was still out in nature. And I read 10 minutes of a novel at lunchtime. It was so funny. She had all these books that she read on a regular basis. And that's how she was so intelligent, because she read a little bit on so many different subjects all throughout the day. And people are like, I don't have time to read, but she would read 10 minutes here and 10 minutes here and 10 minutes there. And then Ben Franklin was very similar of, I read the paper at dinner with this. And I think, I know the book you're referring to about the artist, but I think it's so key because we think that by having this kind of structure to our days, we're going to miss out on the freedom of, oh, I'm inspired and now I want to take my kids on a nature walk. But the fact that you have no rhythm or no routine or no schedule actually inhibits your creativity, and you're missing out on the results that you actually could get if you had these kind of time blocks or had these kind of rhythms and routines in your life, and then go, okay, now I can actually breathe. Now I can actually be more creative because I have space in my days and things are actually getting done. Oh, yeah, no, we're good. So, okay, wrapping up here. Out of all of these different people, what is the thread that you want to leave with people the most?
My favorite chapter is the chapter on Joan of Arc. And I just loved learning about her. I read Mark Twain's biography of her, and he wasn't a believer, but he was moved by her life, like her dedication to God, her purity, her devotion. It's just the reading about her is so encouraging. And her mom, when she died, her mom had to have been devastated. She knew her daughter. She knew her daughter was a good girl, and yet they burned her as a witch. And that had to have been so devastating. But her mom just kept pleading her innocence to the judges, to the priests, and eventually she was exonerated in her mom's lifetime. Wow. And I think that's so encouraging for us, especially those of us who have teens and adults, that sometimes in homeschooling, we're like, whoa, this is not what I expected. Whoa, this is challenging. We think, especially if we were if we were being mentored by people in the 90s where they were like, if you do this, you'll get this result. And there'll be no bumps in the road. And nobody, like none of us, none of us have that story. Do you know what I mean? Most of us as homeschool moms, somewhere there was a little bump in the road. Do you know what I mean? And
or a big mountain.
Right. And yet we think that all of our kids are going to have no bumps in their journey to adulthood. And it's so shocking when they do, and so painful. And so reading Joan of Arc's story and seeing how her mom continued to trust in God. And for homeschool moms, like, we don't get to, like, what we're doing is so important. There's this dichotomy because what we're doing, putting in beauty and truth, reading the scriptures, reading the virtuous books, it is so important and it is making a difference. But also, we don't control the outcome. I'm so grateful. All my children love the Lord. All my children love us. They're all doing their best to live virtuous lives. There's a lot of goodness, but still, it is not. I remember having a little argument with my brother at one point, saying that my kids would never listen to secular music. Like, that is not the case. That is not true.
We will never. Right?
Yes, exactly. So it's a little shocking. Yeah, the road to adulthood and to Christian adulthood is a little bit messier than I thought it might be. And reading Joan of Arc's story, where Joan of Arc's mom continued being steady and faithful despite what was going on around her. And I think sometimes as moms, we tend to adjust our values according to our children's struggles. And
Yeah.
instead, we need to just steadily stay the course, reading the Bible, praying with our children, praying for our children, and trusting that God who began a good work is faithful to complete it, because it is messy sometimes, it is painful sometimes, but just grieve that season, grieve even the disappointment. Parenting, I'm sorry, it is a little disappointing sometimes. It is not a fairy tale. My children all love me, yay, but also your children are going to grow up and they're going to get married. They're going to love somebody else more than you. This is something that in the romantic phase of parenting, you might not realize. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just important that you learn to process with the Lord and learn to let him comfort you. Let him be your best friend. Let him be your emotional support. Let him be the definer of your identity. Because if your identity is in your children, then it's going to be a little shaky, and it's not, God doesn't want that anyhow. So you might have an extra good testimony because he extra wants you to trust in him and not your own goodness as a parent.
Yeah, and that is great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I didn't realize about Joan of Arc. That's a great tie-in too. And I think parents really need that message. And I think I'm so grateful that you're writing the books and you're doing the work that you do, because when I first started out, I was so grateful for Sally Clarkson, and just having another parent that's further down the road than you is so key and so important, talking about the Titus 2 principle and whatnot, because I think there's a lot of homeschool, I don't want to use the word influencer, but I can't think of another one, voices out there that have very young children, and they're telling you how to homeschool and telling you how to parent and telling you all this stuff. And it's like, we need the moms that are 20, 30 years down the road to go, hey, you might want to look at it this way or see this perspective, because when you're in the midst of it and all your kids are really young, it's a very different view than the view from over here. And so thank you for writing this book. I know it will encourage so many parents. Okay. Is it out?
It's shipping July 14th. So you can
Okay.
go
So
to,
this episode should come out right around then. Yeah.
yes, you
Perfect.
can go to inspiredhomeschoolbook.com and there's some pre-order bonuses available.
Oh, good.
And yeah.
Okay, so we will put that in the show notes, and then all of your other social things and the Amazon, it'll be on Amazon and all the other book
Yep.
places too, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. It was it's always fun to chat with you. We
Yeah.
talk forever, but I know you got to go. So thank you so
But
much.
thank you so much, Julie. What a delight to talk to you. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, all right. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Let's wrap up with some key takeaways. Number one, there is no single perfect way to homeschool. The historical figures that Jennifer's book talks about experienced many forms of education. Some learned primarily from parents, some had tutors or mentors, and others had very little formal schooling at all. What mattered most was not the particular method, but the presence of supportive adults, access to meaningful ideas, freedom to explore, and someone willing to recognize and nurture their gifts. Number two, an inspired homeschool begins with an inspired parent. Children often absorb way more from the way we live than from the lessons we formally teach. A parent who reads, asks questions, explores new interests, appreciates beauty, and remains curious creates an atmosphere in which learning feels natural and meaningful. Rather than focusing only on completing assignments, parents can ask themselves whether they are modeling the kind of thoughtful, engaged life they hope their children will develop. Number three, gentle education can still be rigorous. Gentle homeschooling does not mean lowering expectations, eliminating boundaries, or allowing learning to become directionless. It means respecting children as persons and offering work that is developmentally appropriate. Reading rich literature, studying scripture, observing nature, discussing ideas, practicing narration, and building strong habits can be deeply challenging without feeling rushed, harsh, or unnecessarily tedious. Number four, habits create room for freedom and creativity. Structure does not stifle creativity. Healthy rhythms and habits can actually make creativity possible by reducing chaos and creating space for meaningful work. We discussed how Ben Franklin used disciplined routines to support learning and accomplishment. Homeschool families can begin with small habits that support spiritual life, household responsibilities, schoolwork, and family relationships. And last but not least, parents are called to faithfulness, not control. Homeschooling is important, but it does not give parents complete control over who their children become. Children will grow, struggle, make decisions, and follow paths that may not look exactly like we would have hoped or imagined. Jennifer pointed to the story of Joan of Arc's mother as an example of remaining steady and faithful through heartbreak. Parents can continue praying, living according to their values, and trusting God to complete the work He has begun, even when the journey is messier than expected. Make sure you check out Jennifer's new book, The Inspired Homeschool: How History's Heroes Light a Path Toward Joyful, Confident Learning, wherever books are sold. Thanks for listening.